All right. My temporary sickness has left my body, so we're pretty much good to go. There's not much else to really do here. We're just here now, and I get to finally record this review. And speaking of nice developments of, I guess, well beings and all that, look, Rao's back from surgery. He's back on the shelf. Don't worry. There's also probably more on the shelf than what was previously seen last time. But Rao's back. That's cool. Anyways, it's finally time for what is essentially the last Arc 9 review. I mean, there's a full version that'll come out later, but this is the last thing to review for Arc 9. This is it. This is the final volume. A volume I honestly kind of wish I got to when it had dropped pretty much last year. Or I don't even know fully if it was last year, but I think it was either around the end of last year or the start of this year. Uh, Something I wish I got to for a while now, but you know what? At least we're here now, and I'll try and be quicker, obviously, with Arc 10. Hopefully, we can stay caught up on that. But as for this, we finally get to end it off. So let's just get into this and end it off. Why not? Just hurry up, go, and I have to think of some music for this review, but I'm not too sure what I'm gonna use because I feel like this is such a dramatic sort of thing that it's tough to think of what will work for this. And I'm starting to realize that as risky as it is, I could use a running sky. You know, it's brand new, it's nice, it fits a lot of this. But I don't know how that'll work out for me because it's running sky and that could cause some issues for the video. But fuck it, let's take that chance. So, as to be expected, we're starting off pretty much right off the bat with a fight. I mean, we kind of knew this was going to be the case. Literally, last time we ended off with a majority of the fights being done, and now it was just Rem and Amelia versus Ye and Al. And of course, because of the scenario, it's mainly just Amelia and Rem versus Ye, right? So this is the big two-on-one sort of fight we're getting here. And there's a whole lot that happens, especially with the fact that Rem and Amelia cause the whole discus that they're on to start spinning around and everything. So now all three of them kind of have to keep themselves, balanced, not fall off, whatever it may be, and focus on the fight at the exact same time. All within a presumably relatively short interval in time, based on obviously how they describe it in text, but also from what we know of, yeah, they're pretty high up in the sky. But at the same time, eventually they're going to come crashing down, and we'll get to that. But it's kind of funny to think about. This is like, it's weird to compare it to this, I suppose, but this is almost like the weird, like, Boo saga sort of effect in Dragon Ball, where you watch that entire saga and you go, wow, isn't it fucking weird that this takes place in a matter of 2 days? Like, that entire thing is just 2 days, and it feels strange to think about. Similarly, this is like a really short interval of time that this fight is going on, and yet all this crazy shit is happening. The disc is spinning, Ye's doing her Crimson Sakura stuff again, where there's just fire spreading throughout, yet they're doing pretty well to take advantage of the moment and still kind of get to her and everything, especially Rem, who obviously can kind of work around this sort of stuff, considering, mana in the air, all this, whatever it may be, right? Her blood's doing pretty well to help her out in this fight. Whole bunch of shit happening. And of course, the biggest of all being the realization for them that, oh no, Al's not here anymore. He fucked off a while ago and created stone wings to glide through the air and get to where he needs to be. So Amelia follows suit, makes wings of her own, Rem helps her out, and now it is pretty much just a one-on-one between Ye and Rem. And from here, we get a massive chapter talking about Ye and Ye alone. It is a whole lot. We get her whole backstory, going into how she was as a kid and her life as a shinobi, going over all these details with Olbert and all these people she had killed but never thought twice about, or whatever it may be. And yet eventually there's someone who asks to be spared, and she willingly did so, and that person just so happened to be Todd. And her whole introduction to Al and, you know, the mansion, realizing that, oh god, this guy's like fucked up for some reason. They're like, I'm killing him, I'm doing all sorts of different shit, and he keeps coming back, and that's terrifying to me. And in that moment, reading that whole thing, it is very strange, because you read that and understand that Yae is talking about the multiple deaths she's seen from Al that she caused. But you think about that for a second and you go, that's not right. Right? In that moment, you're kind of realizing, hold on, that's not how that works. We know it with Subaru. You know, the main person, the instigator, I guess, towards using this sort of like reversal of time. That is the person who gets to have knowledge on all this. Not the essentially, you know, person that caused that death to happen. So it's really strange that she says that. But it's very important to note. Teppei writes it in such a specific way where you can tell, oh, okay, there's something of significance here. Okay. And after that, you get the fight between Yae and Rem. It's a really fucking cool fight, because it's a constant back and forth between them of just Rem going nuts and still obviously getting slashed up, but thankfully she's regenerating over time. And it's just this pure like dance between them of just blood flying in the air, because they're both putting up a great fight. And eventually, Rem does a really sneaky trick of having like Yae worry about when it's going to come crashing down, right? When the disc is going to come crashing down. Because Rem starts going 10 seconds till it hits the ground, and Yae on the spot, because this is a, you know, instant death sort of fight, like any wrong move could kill him. Yae hears that and thinks it's legit. Like, Rem seems to have a kind enough soul that Yae just thinks in the moment, okay, I guess she's being serious, right? On top of the fact that it's like, this is a split-second sort of decision that you have to make. So, realizing that it's 10 or 5 seconds till everything comes crashing down, you kind of just have to act. And yet, Rem fucks with her, because she says just a random amount of time, and instead, when it's actually all going to come to an end, she says, now. Like, she just out of nowhere shouts, now, and takes action before Yae can even do anything. It's so fucking cool. You could argue that, in a sense, because of Rem's character, this is a bit undignified for her to fight like this, right? This does not seem like something that a dutiful sort of maid would do in a fight like this, right? Where both of them have respect and both of them very clearly have love towards the people they're trying to protect, right? Because as much as Yae tries to ignore it in this whole fight, that's what this fight establishes. It establishes that even prior to this chapter, but this fight especially shows that, much like Rem with Subaru, there is someone that Yae cares about. As weird and as twisted as it could be, there is someone she cares about. And in that moment, you could argue that this is something like shitty for Rem to do, but I think this does kind of show the flaw of her character. Not the fact that she was willing to do this, but this shows her character as a whole through one action alone. Listen, she's dignified, she knows what to do in a fight to act, you know, proper, and overall tries to stay formal and have respect for her sister and everything and all this sort of stuff, right? Whole list of things to her character that we already know. But it is always seen in these scenes with her where, you know, she's acting respectful to her sister, or she's being a dutiful maid, or whatever it may be. It is always seen that there is this different side to her, right? That there is a side to her that isn't always perfect, that has her moments where she makes mistakes and everything. Everybody does, but I think this kind of shows that the most. There is a much more, I almost want to say savage, and I don't think savage is technically correct, solely because it implies something very primal, but I think there's something there to Rem's character that shows a side of her that just needs to focus on winning, right? The methods of which do not matter. It's just a matter of, if she can fool Yae into this situation where she's pretty much forced to lose, that works, right? As much as this should be a proper fight between them, if a win can be achieved, That's all that matters, essentially, right? So that's what that plan feels like, and I like it a lot for what Rem does there. And ironically, it doesn't even end the fight. Ye still puts up a really good fight afterwards, and Rem's getting hurt a decent bit, but ultimately Rem does put an end to it and reveals to Ye a understanding that she had yet to fully realize, that whole aspect of love, that whole caring for someone else, the idea of having this mission forced upon you by someone that you care about, or presumably a mission that someone would pass on to you, even if they can't really say it with words, much like Subaru's scenario, that all of that culminates into this feeling of you have to do it because you love them, right? This is your job in that moment because you trust them, because you care about them, whatever it may be. And I love this a lot, genuinely, for being such a long chapter about a character that if you don't read the side stories, you know almost jack shit about prior to Arc 9. It's a really good chapter for establishing Ye's character. I think this was genuinely one of the best chapters to have to establish a whole lot about her. We then, of course, not surprisingly, because there's pretty much nothing left, follow this into a chapter about Al, and primarily actually about Al and his experience with Echidna, which, okay, when I was streaming these reading sessions, I need to note this ahead of time, just because it's fairly embarrassing, but I think I should admit it. I did not fully read some of it correctly. In particular note, or I guess rather of particular note, the comment about Echidna's eyes, it was talking about the actual, eye color, right? The iris. It was not talking about her pupil, like the actual in-between sort of part. I thought it was talking about the pupil. So it felt weird to read, in my own brain, a black pupil. Because I was like, huh, that's weird. ReZero has a lot of characters with that, white pupil sort of look. And there's not a lot that have, solid black on there. But there are a few. And it came to this point where I had realized, wait a minute, Pandora has that. Pandora has a black pupil completely compared to every other witch that has white. And I'm like, holy shit, it's not Echidna, it's Pandora. No, I'm actually just stupid and I didn't read it correctly. It specified the irises. And yet I looked at that as pupil and thought it was talking about Pandora. So I do want to just put that on record to say that I'm illiterate and could not see that part. And this is entirely something that I pointed out to myself. This wasn't even a comment in chat or anything at the time of that reading session. I had just noticed it myself and then proceeded to make fun of myself for it. So anyways, we get a whole chapter essentially going into the history with Al and Echidna. And we learn the really interesting thing that Al has presumably seen Echidna die. On top of the fact that she used the sealing technique that was used on Subaru and Beatrice on him. Which is like, okay, that's pretty interesting. And eventually he was broken out and he was on the island, the Gladiator Island. So everything we saw with EX5 was pretty much after this, right? And I mean, obviously that makes sense, right? EX5 doesn't necessarily introduce Al as this brand new character, just fresh into this new world, whatever it may be. We obviously know that, but he is kind of been there, but he has kind of been on that island for a while now. That's what they establish with it, right? So it's interesting to actually see the background leading into this moment where, oh shit, yeah, now he's on the island. There are people he's beating the shit out of to either learn more or to survive or whatever it might be. And eventually we get to that point in EX5 and everything onward happens, him going into Priscilla's camp, all this, and it all essentially leads into the finale for our chapter, the fact that this fight is happening, Al versus Amelia, where Al pulls a very similar trick on her that he did before with the giant falling rock, hits her with that again. And then we get knowledge that Al has kind of met with Echidna again, or at least presumably so, based on the fact that they talk about the sanctuary and everything regarding that, and how it threw him off so much at one point. And you know, there's where the line of "Why must love fade" comes in, and oh, it's so interesting to see more of his character, and yet he is still very much shrouded in mystery. We don't know enough about Al still, despite all this, but it's so cool to get these details in there. Of course, there's not too much of that in this actual chapter. Most of it kind of focuses more so on the fight in that sense, and there's a good back and forth between Amelia and Al, despite the fact that a majority of the time they're just flying in the air. Like, this fight is hardly on the ground at all. It is just them gliding in the air doing shit, which has me curious to see this when it's animated way later down the line. I think this will be pretty interesting to look at. But Amelia ultimately is knocked out by all this stuff, right? She can't handle the full brunt of everything that has happened. And of course, I'll make sure not to kill her, because this is his whole rule that he has here. But Amelia had a unconscious sort of action to send out this massive pillar of ice that both, you know, helped Rem with the fight that had happened prior, right? Because that's your big reveal here, is that, yeah, obviously we kind of knew this based on this sort of crash that had happened in the ice that we had seen with the fight against, you know, Rem and Ye. But now having the extra knowledge of, oh yeah, Amelia was knocked out but did this unconsciously, and it also helped with one other thing, sending a nice signal to a massive party of Felt, Petra, and the others that were nearby, ready to take on Al. And that's where this begins. And now we get a few different perspectives here for this section of the fight, right? We get the understanding from Al that he kind of knows what's going on with Petra and everything. He knows there's some shit happening, and probably a witch factor in all this. And we get Petra's side, of course, going into the whole strategy that they have here for dealing with him. Because, of course, if he can reverse time, if he can just die in reverse, that's going to be a huge issue. We do actually get a really nice scene at the start of this that I enjoy quite a bit, which is Petra talking to Melee. And Melee is exhausted, right? After everything that happened with the previous battle, she is pretty much done. Yet, she still wants to help out because obviously this battle matters, but then at the same time, Petra might get hurt, and she doesn't want her friend getting hurt. And it's like, I talked about this in my reading session. This moment happening while Arc 6 is being animated feels so nice. Like, again, I know I'm behind on this, right? I'm technically only reading this now just because of the scenario of things, and, you know, how much shit I was working on prior to, you know, all this happening and whatever it may be. So realistically, I could have read this well before Arc 6 was animated, but I'm kind of glad in a sense it happened now, because Melee's whole character in Arc 6 is now fresh on the mind, right? This character who is still understanding her place in the world and is afraid of dying and misses her big sister a lot and all this sort of stuff. But having that contrast with Melee here, who wants to make sure Petra's okay, who wants to make sure everybody else is okay, who feels like she still has a duty to fulfill, and trying to push herself to that extent. Even the extra bit to this, where Petra has to convince her by saying, you know, Subaru would probably be upset if you're not getting proper rest, and Melee backing out as a result of that, right? It's so damn good. Like, especially that aspect, right? The whole backing out once she realizes that, like, sort of thing with Subaru. Because it's like, yeah, after having the finale of Arc 6, and, you know, that's not animated yet at the time of this recording. I mean, shit, it's currently on break while this recording's happening. But having that moment at the end of Arc 6 where, you know, Subaru asks Melee, hey, after all this is said and done, would you like to become my daughter, right? Like, this whole thing of just you've been abused, you've had to deal with a whole lot of shit. What if we just take you away from that, right? What if you have a proper family, you know, food on your plate, whatever it may be, stuff that you should have normally had, just living a proper life instead of whatever the fuck you have to go through, all that. The fact that I get to think about that scene in regards to this, right? In regards to her reason to leave, it's like, that hurts, right? It hurts, and in a sense, in a good way. I am glad to see this scene play out as a result of all that. But of course, we have the fight here, and it's a pretty fucking cool fight. Obviously, again, they have to figure out what to do about Al, and Al is picking up pretty quickly on what's going on with Petra. But he reveals a secret little technique that nobody was quite ready for. And it's the idea of, well, you can compress thoughts. You can compress emotions and feelings as well. So she hits Al with some feedback of everything he's had to deal with, just over and over again. And it's not too great for him. Thankfully for Al, though, he has a little trick up his sleeve that we kind of now have the explanation for something we previously learned about. Old Man Rom gets knocked out. Then the scene plays again. Old Man Rom gets knocked out. The scene plays again. Old Man Rom gets knocked out. He gets knocked out 6 times before that's all over. Or I guess more accurately, by that 6th time, he's done, right? That's it. That's the moment where he is knocked out, right? He experiences that moment multiple times is the more accurate way to put it. And then, boom. And that's a little interesting, right? In terms of just, oh, so he experienced all that, and then click. What could that be? Well, our next chapter explains to us that this is a little bug in Al's territory. If there's an aggressor towards it, much like the title of this chapter, Al's territory will do some weird shit where it will rewind and then rewind and then rewind over and over again until it has determined that the aggressor is taken care of. So, someone like Old Man Rom, trying to take action to, take Al down, gets hit with that. And then again, and then again. And he is then knocked out at the end of it. The same thing happens to the rest of the party. It doesn't matter that Petra essentially manages to take the time to figure out what's going on. They're still hit by that. Ultimately, there's nothing you can do against that. It's pretty damn rough, and it makes you realize, oh, this is what Ye went through. All these deaths she imagined Al having, she didn't imagine them. They happened. She technically experienced that just as much as he did. But the difference is, the bug made all of that not happen anymore. That's why she's so terrified of him. Because this bug, for some reason, exists and lets Al do this. He can't even use it knowingly. It just kind of happens. And then we're hit with another really long chapter, and another named one just like Ye's, yet it's a very shocking named chapter to be hit by. The named chapter in specific being Petra's. Yeah, this is a real interesting one to get out of nowhere, but this is it, and it makes sense. Obviously, this arc is huge for her, but yeah, I mean, getting this named chapter, it's like, okay, wow, we're finally here. So we get the whole background to Petra, understanding that she's just a regular village girl that, technically speaking, normally should have lived a very simple life, enjoying the simplicities of it and all that, and going on from there. And nothing too extravagant as going on journeys with a royal candidate camp to deal with multiple different threats and the like, right? It's a very interesting backstory that puts a lot of that into perspective, and it's kind of funny to get a backstory like this about oh yeah, this little girl essentially that, you know, was expected to have lived a very normal life, super simple, all this. And coincidentally, I am reading all of that in terms of this backstory right around the same time as a certain video game had dropped another chapter, and we learned more about a specific character who was living a rather normal life and was kind of getting tired of it, and depending on certain outcomes that obviously can change. It's really interesting to have similar perspectives, I guess, on a topic like that, yet still obviously very different. Not surprisingly, however, as a result of literally everything going on with the whole bug in Al's territory, Petra's mind is kind of withering away. This is a rough moment for her because everything's just playing over and over again. She starts screaming, she starts insulting everybody. She at one point says she cares about all of them, and then the next loop after, she starts cursing them out and everything. She makes magic in her hand to form into a gun, because, you know, obviously now she's familiar with that because of Subaru, and tries to shoot herself, and then does it only to then repeat the loop again because of Al's scenario here. She curses Al out a ton. She is mad at herself and the hundreds of times she's had to go through this, because she's had to experience this loop more than the loops that Subaru has had to experience. It's kind of funny to say that Subaru, out of like all three characters that we know of that have experienced these loops, he's experienced this the least out of the other two. Petra's having a real rough time. It's bad. It's really fucking bad. But there is an interesting thing that, you know, she starts to realize with this scenario and with the vows she had essentially made in order to be able to use this. And that's the fact that something like giving up or anything of the sort, she's not allowed to do anymore. So this loop, as much as Al wants it to knock her out, she physically can't be knocked out by something like this. She presents that to Al. Al sits there and goes, oh fuck. Shit, what do I do now then? Because if it's just going to loop again, oh, that's going to be a problem. He tries to just very temporarily stop it for a moment. Petra takes advantage of that moment. Compress agony. Once again, he is hit with all that shit. And she hits him with the perfect line. Because this entire time, this is something I've yet to mention, this entire time, Al has been helping, in a sense, to break her by constantly saying play ball, right? He's been saying play ball anytime that it was about to loop, because, you know, Petra was trying to move away from him, right? Not get like involved with what was going on. And obviously also there are multiple other scenarios where she tried to kill him, she tried to have him kill her, you know, all this sort of other stuff and other options she had. None of them worked, and it always resulted in play ball, loop. But she hits him back right after this compressed agony with the perfect line of game set. Roy shows up, and shockingly, Petra had a plan here. Petra was actually going to use Roy to her advantage, because Petra knows something that no one else should. Petra knows about the witch, and the fact that she, you know, she's involved with Subaru, and the fact that Subaru returns by death. So if Petra's memory of that fades away, that's it. That's all it takes, and Reinhard will come back. Now, unfortunately, given his scenario, Al is a little tight on options here. So of course the immediate thing he thinks to do is, I'll just die, right? I've got this shit behind my molars. All I gotta do is get the poison in me. That's it, right? We loop, we redo this. I have her not summon Roy. I have her not use compressed agony, anything like that. We avoid that entirely. Petra planned ahead. Petra knew he would do something like that, so she had summoned Fyrus. Fyrus shows up and puts some interesting healing magic on Al. Specifically, healing magic that will pretty much never fade. So it does not matter what injury he gives himself. It does not matter how hard he tries. It does not matter if he swallows the poison. Al will always be healed. He will always live. His territory is now useless. This fight is pretty much turned entirely in Petra's favor. But if you remember the previous volume, there is one detail I've yet to talk about in this entire thing. The geyser. The geyser is still around. And that shot to it from Alcanica, that's yet to happen. Except for right now. Because now, the geyser activates, a plume of smoke takes up the battlefield to a point that nobody can see each other anymore, and Al pleads and screams at Roy to show up and take his name, and this is where we get the reveal of Al's real name, Natsuki Regal. There was a lot to take in at this moment of the reading session. You could even go and check it out because, yeah, I was pretty stunned by that name, not surprisingly. Obviously, the immediate comparison people are going to make is the Sloth If, and I don't think this inherently is, you know, Sloth If Natsuki Regal. I'm not saying that it isn't, but I'm not also saying that it is, right? Simple enough of just, it could be, but we don't know, like, much more info outside of this. So, we keep it at that. However, I did have some opinions about this, and good ones, I want to note. Not anything, like, critical of this. I think this is just interesting. To be hit by an obvious, very specific name of Natsuki Regal, right? Having the Natsuki in there, and then having the name of a star in there, implies a lot. Not to mention the fact that I really like this, because for so long, people wanted to say the theory that Al is Subaru, and that's all it was. And I'm like, listen, I get the idea here. I get the foundation. I get what we want to go for with this sort of thing. But the problem is, Teppei has never been very simple with his plot twists, right? When he has done big reveals that feel like a massive twist to the story, I feel like a lot of us have not been able to predict it. Maybe once or twice you could, right? If we had something in the background to kind of have this sort of foundation to it. But I don't think there was actually enough for Al to understand that, yeah, I mean, maybe it really is, you know, the same person here. No, I don't think there was enough. There are details that, yeah, sure, line up, but there are also details that don't. I also think that would have been just a really weak twist, and I'm sure a lot of other people might agree with me on that. This was the easiest, like, theory people had, no matter where, right? Just worldwide, this was kind of the easiest theory people had about Al. So it would feel like a bit of a cheap twist to just say, oh yeah, he's just Subaru and that's it. So of course, it's not surprising if that's not the case. That said, what is the case is kind of confusing, and again, in a good way. I am so curious to see what the fuck this means, because ultimately, we don't know. Like, I mean, just saying it ahead of time, by the end of this arc, we do not know what any of this means, and there are some obvious points to make after this. But it's kind of interesting that, yeah, we still don't have enough information to say more about Mr. Natsuki Regal himself. But there's interesting pieces of info, like, okay, yeah, he's involved with Echidna. He presumably knew Echidna while she was alive, which is way, like, long in the past. But also the whole stuff with the Gladiator Island, and we know generally what his hair looks like. I mean, I'm just saying, it is blue, right? Anything could be the case here, and it's hard to tell, and I kind of like that, because now we have an answer, and yet we don't have everything, and it's so interesting to learn. This is what I enjoy most, honestly, about mysteries and series. There are multiple different things I could give examples of, especially for either recency or soon to be recent this summer. But there's a lot in terms of this sort of thing where, oh man, it's so cool to just get an answer to something, and yet now you have a new mystery to solve with that answer you got, right? It's not the end-all be-all for what you were seeking. It's just a step in the right direction, but you're not quite there yet, right? So it's like, oh, I love that. I love that with this sort of shit. Just narratively, it's such a cool thing to do. Love it a lot. And that is what ends off this specific chapter. And of course, for the sake of important context, our next chapter pretty much starts us off with Fierce's involvement with this whole thing, right? We learn what had happened and the fact that Krush was pretty much like, yeah, go help out because, you know, this is what we need here. So, obviously, now we know how Fierce got into this situation. We get more of Al and Priscilla in his head, saying the last words that she said to him so long ago, yet, you know, it's really taking some digs at him at this point because of just his whole situation. And then he sees a silhouette of someone with braided hair within the smoke and thinks it's Roy, so finally his chance is here. Roy will eat his name, and then it's revealed to be Ye. Ye's standing in the smoke. And we get our reveal that Rem had spared her, because obviously this would sadden someone like Subaru for Rem to just heartlessly kill someone without any thought or anything like that. Especially someone who had just understood love for the first time, or essentially that. And having that moment with Ye, right, leading all into this, where instead of assisting Al like she wanted to, like literally even in this moment, she kind of wanted to help out, her different idea of help now is to restrain him. Because if all this happens, that's it, right? There's no going back for Al. So it's again, it's this odd sort of moment between the two of them in a sense, but it is really beautiful, even if odd, and I like it a lot. Of course, Amelia wakes up to help out, shoots out a few icicle lines to try and stop the geyser. Doesn't do too much. But then, to assist even further, Reinhardt arrives. And then now we get background context about Roy and his whole thing, and shockingly we kind of learn that Lai was the only one out of the three gluttonies that gave a shit about his siblings. Like, he was pretty defensive about them, and obviously for Louis, he was focused on, you know, providing her with food and everything. But we kind of see here that, much like Louis, Roy did not give a fuck about them. Like, he finds it, yeah, unfortunate, but he's like, it's slightly inconvenient, that's about it. And it's like, okay, wow, you're an asshole. But then Petra shows up in front of him because this is the whole plan, and she gives Roy the name that she decided for herself, because of course before her proper name didn't work out, so she now has a different name. Because again, we know, thanks to the whole explanation of gluttony, that there are certain complications that happen sometimes, especially if her last name is changed. And Petra did change her last name, because now she's Petra Baumann. And that hit pretty hard. Even now, it's hitting me pretty fucking hard to just repeat. Because, yeah, wow. For having a whole chapter, named chapter at that, where Petra showed how much she cared about everybody, and obviously kind of focusing the most on Frederica and the fact that Frederica is this elder sister sort of character. We have the, you know, I think it's volume 12 cover. I believe it's volume 12. I want to say, it's on the shelf back there. I technically speaking could just look, but still, I think it's volume 12 because I think volume 13 is the Elsa and Melee one, and it's kind of meant to contrast each other with Frederica and Petra there, and that's just cute scene between them. And it's like, there's a lot, right? There's a lot to this that feels super important, and having this moment where she says that name hits hard. It's so fucking crazy. Just as this, like, oh man, it was kind of here where I was like, I mean, a little bit earlier as well, but more so with the named chapter, but it was kind of here where I really did think about the fact that I'm shocked by how much people disliked Petra. I guess more specifically before Arc 9. Like, I thought she was a pretty okay character, right? Nothing crazy, but she did have good moments in there, and yet people were shockingly, like, fairly aggressive with her character and being like, man, I fucking hate this character. This character needs to be written out or dead. And I'm just like, okay, let's back up a minute, right? Like, this is a lot for a character that's literally just a kid, you know, going through a life that they did not expect because they were expecting to just live in the village and that's it. And now they're part of all this, right? But especially here and that name chapter, it's kind of where I realized, yeah, I don't know, I'm shocked by that because this is such a good moment after everything we've seen with her character. On top of the fact that it's immediately coupled directly after with her proclaiming her love to the imaginary Subaru before she gets her name eaten. And it's like, dude, I don't know, that's a lot for this character at once, right? That's a lot to just give her, essentially. And I can only assume that people enjoy her now, right? But I mean, maybe not, right? And of course, everybody's entitled to their opinions. Obviously, it's always the case. But it is fair to learn things about that sort of thing. It is fair to, in a sense, critique it if you think there is something there that seems a little strange, right? And this is that sort of scenario where I'm like, I don't know, if you can go through this arc and still really dislike her character, I don't know what to say, right? It kind of feels strange because it's like, I think you could find her okay, and you could potentially still find moments with her maybe annoying, but she's a really damn well-written character. The pay is 2 for 2 for writing these kids as like just absurdly well-written, massive in terms of this whole backstory and development that they have sort of characters. Like first with Melee and now Petra, they both get to share this sort of thing. It's pretty wild. By doing this, Roy breaks his vow. That's it, right? This was the whole deal he had. Do not, you know, use his authority unless instructed to by Al or whatever it may be, right? And that breaks it. So Roy is pretty much now permitted to die. And he's slowly burning away. Except because of what happens with Petra, Reinhard shows up. And he only shows up because the divine protection of the Phoenix allowed him to teleport right over. So pretty much he died, teleported right over to where he needs to be. Because we of course need to make him more broken than he already is. He essentially puts Roy out of his misery, just right then and there. And then after finishing off Roy, Reinhard shows up in front of Al, and you know, Al makes the snarky little remark of, hey, I mean, I know you might want to kill me in this moment, but Beerus's healing is going to prevent any of that. So, good luck with that. And Reinhard reveals, oh, don't worry, I have no intention of doing that. Instead, and just shoves his hand right into Al and just pulls out a little orb and goes, got this now, which is a bit of a problem. But the good news is, for Al, I guess more so, is that the magic on that was created by a witch. So it's pretty hard to destroy that sort of thing if, you know, Reinhard even wants to try. Which he does. Because Reinhard happens to have something on him that was pretty good at fending off witches before. So he proceeds to pull out the Dragon Sword Raid. Because whether it be because of Subaru or Satara with Subaru, he's able to pull that out. And he just takes a nice swipe at the orb, and that's all he needs to get Subaru and Beatrice out. Now, I do actually find this detail in particular very interesting, right? Because the whole point of the Dragon Sword Raid is the fact that it can be pulled out if you're worthy. If you are not worthy, it cannot be pulled out. So it is interesting because realistically, the obvious answer here is that it's under the distinction of what is Reinhard going to slash, right? So therefore that would determine whether or not he can pull it out. But it did make me wonder in a sense, what is the limit to that, right? Like, very clearly, if someone is in the vicinity, that can't be the case, right? We know that with Arc 1 and everything. Otherwise, he'd be able to pull it out in that moment because Subaru would be there, right? But alternatively, it is interesting to think, well, you know, it was a random idea I had while reading it, but it's like, what if he's facing the general direction of Subaru? What if he's engaging in that and then he can pull it out? And if he can pull it out in that moment, what happens if he changes targets, right? What happens then if he were to pull it out, has it out? Well, now if he changes over, does it become super weighted and just slams into the ground? Or can he still use it, but it just lacks its power? Whatever it may be. You know, it was just random ideas that were like springing through my mind while reading it. It's like, huh, that's interesting to think about, considering, you know, what we saw with Arc 1 and everything. Like, we know there are limits to it, but it's like, I almost want to learn how far can that limit be pushed. That's not really that important though. I just felt like sharing it because that was like an interesting thought with the actual reading session itself. And I feel even now it's still interesting to think about with the sword. But Subaru is unsealed, and so is Beatrice, and the next part of their plan is enacted. The part that we had yet to learn, because Petra and Rem had a bit more of a private talk than we had thought originally with the whole the witches listening sort of stuff. We had actually now learned that Petra and Rem obviously discussed their immense love for Subaru. And Petra posed a very interesting question that to me feels like a double meaning, which is essentially, how far are you willing to go for Subaru, right? Not necessarily that one-to-one, but what is essentially that based on just a question of, you know, how much do you love him? How much do you care about him? All this, right? And it's interesting as a question in this sort of concept because, like I said, it means two things here. One, the obvious, flat out sort of thing. How far are you willing to go for him, right? But additionally, the second part of that feels like how far for your own self, right? How you might feel about this, how you might feel burdened or saddened or guilty for whatever may happen. How far are you willing to go? Because you care that much about him. Because the next part in their plan is very simple. If they need to fix what's going on with the geyser, they need to fix what's going on with Al and all this sort of shit, the easiest way to do so is simple. Rem swings her Morning Star directly at Subaru. And just before he dies, Al starts cursing him out. Like, I mean, prior to that, he's already screaming Subaru's name when he's getting unsealed. But in that moment, he's cursing him out, telling him how much he hates him. And just before he can say too much, he is cut off by the sound of chains. Literally the same, you know, chapter title and everything. Very fitting to have in there. And that's it. But I do find what he said interesting because specifically with how it's translated as shitty and then the letter O. And I'm like, that's interesting because there's obviously numerous ways you can go about from just that. But I feel like the most common way, the most common phrase used, especially, I mean, not just for a series like this, but just in general lingo and that sort of stuff, if you wanted to essentially curse out a parent, one of the most common ways you'd see is shitty old man. So I find that really interesting if that ends up being the case, right? Because it's like, ooh, that's the way you'd curse out a parent, right? Like I just said, it's like, it's literally just that. So if that's the continuation, we have some interesting little info on our hands. We got some info that I don't even know what the fuck this means, right? Because it's like, how the fuck did this end up being the case, right? It means that Natsuki Regal is Natsuki Regal, right? But it's just a whole lot to take in if that were to be the case. This isn't the theory that I'm necessarily going with as this, like, it has to be Subaru's kid, you know, I am different, right? It's less that, and more so just I saw that sentence and thought, there's a lot of ways this could go, but I feel like the most simple sort of sentence you could have in there that doesn't feel too complex as a curse of a name would just be that, right? And that then implies certain things. Interesting overall. I just don't know that that would be the case. But still, as a result of all this, we loop. And this is where I learned, and I wasn't surprised because I guessed as much. There was a similar case with Arc 7 with a single chapter. This was where things got a little controversial for the arc. We loop all the way back to the end of Phase 1 because, not surprisingly, that's the last time Subaru was involved. And that scene plays out, but Subaru seems a little bit more worried with how he acts and talks, and we actually get Al's perspective on everything going on here rather than Subaru and Beatrice. So it's interesting in that regard. But the difference here is that when the sealing technique is used, Subaru and Beatrice reverse it on Al, Garfield and Ezo are there as witnesses, and Subaru gets a big, genuinely very heartfelt hug from Petra and everybody else involved, minus Ezo. He kind of sits on the side. He can sit on the side if he wants to, but everybody else hugs Subaru. That's that. And it's a really great moment, and I can understand why this would be an issue to people, right? I said as much on the reading session, and I even brought up the fact that I think I like this more than I dislike this. I think I like this a shit ton. I have thought more on this, and ironically, this is the reverse of something like how I had felt with, random example, but it fits, and obviously I'm not going to go into details, Chainsaw Man's ending, right? Specifically for part 2, which is ultimately what ends the whole thing, right? But Chainsaw Man part 2's ending. For a while, I sat there and I went, yeah, I could see what Fujimoto was going for here, and I really liked it. But I do think that everything prior needed to be fixed because this did fuck up a whole lot of stuff. But, you know, that is what I had in mind for a general sort of ending for the series, right? As time went on, after I had read that finale, I kind of sat there for a while and went, okay, I still partially stand by what I said. I think that, yes, I expected this to be the final result of this whole thing. But this did so much damage to that whole part that it is unbelievable. Like, it is rough. I do not like that at all, right? I had come to the realization of, I wish this was better, because man, it's a cool idea, but holy shit is it, like, abysmal in execution. It's bad. It's really bad. I was super upset when I had just, you know, the week and then the week after and then the month passed, and I just started thinking about it and going, no, this is just rough, right? I had the reverse effect here. With this, I had realized in the moment, yeah, I think I still really like this arc. I think even with this chapter itself is pretty damn good. It's just, yeah, obviously there's a lot to take in here in the moment. But as time passed, I kind of started to realize, you know what this is? This is taking a lot of inspiration for something that very clearly inspired this whole story, or maybe not the whole story, but the idea of, you know, the reversal of time. This is just Steins Gate. And I fucking love Steins Gate. Like, this is the same sort of deal. Obviously, again, I'm not going to go too much into details with this, but a big thing with Steins Gate is returning to a point where this stuff can be fixed, right? In that sense, this is the exact same thing. There is no way to fix this at all, because as soon as the geyser starts, they're fucked, right? It's a very clear thing that it kind of established when Amelia's using the icicle line, and it's really doing nothing, and none of them can do too much about it, and ultimately, all Al had to do is, presumably, because we don't know fully what the geyser would have done, presumably throw Subaru in there and maybe he returns to the real world, and after that, who knows, right? Can he even get back? That might require some weird magic shit, but even then, I don't know that that would be the case, right? It's a scenario where I don't know that any of this could have gone down the way it would have normally. So yes, we did have to Steins-Gate this shit and reel it back to this moment where, yeah, we're at the end of phase 1. Let's do that again. But Al gets sealed because Subaru has knowledge of what happened, right? He feels sad. He doesn't really want to do this in a sense, and he doesn't fully understand where Al's coming from. But this is something he has to do. And I love this moment a lot, right? After realizing that, it kind of just hit me of like, no, yeah, I like this a lot. This is really well done for establishing that sort of thing. And I'm going to be real. This arc did a lot for a ton of the characters, so much so that I don't think we could realistically get away with it normally. Let's put everything into perspective here, right? First off, Roy is dead. Now, I did half expect him to die within this arc just because of the scenario of things. Like, he had been around for a while and I expected this to be a big redeeming moment for him, which it kind of was, right? It kind of showed that he wasn't the jobber we kind of expected him to be. As much as I half expected that, yeah, Roy died pretty easily via both this deal that he had made plus Reinhard. The witch, albeit temporarily, got a bit unsealed and was wrecking a little bit of havoc by the tower. Everything that happened with Petra is rough to carry on, especially because, again, the stuff with the witch. And even then, you could make the argument of, well, she had her name eaten. Then furthermore, she had her name eaten. That's a bit of an issue, right? We don't know if that stuff can be regurgitated if Roy is dead, because then it just falls on Louis or Fika. So it's like, okay, it's just her now. But again, that's just her and she's in Wallachia. Bit of an issue. Speaking of that sort of thing, Otto. Otto's knocked out right now. That's the problem. Rem learned everything again about herself, about, Subaru, everybody, like, all of it came flooding back. And that's a really nice moment. I love that moment. But also, for being in the middle of an arc that's, like, not even fully at the end of the series yet, and I'm not saying it has to happen at the end of the series, but I'm saying for being an arc that's not quite there yet, it's kind of wild to just have that slap dab in the middle. It's kind of weird. But all of that, plus just multitudes of other things. Again, the geyser, it's like, I don't know. It's a bit strange to be hit with all of this at once and expect it to keep going. So I do think it kind of makes sense to just say, fuck it, rewind button, let's go back to this point. Most of this did not happen. Subaru remembers it though. Subaru was aware of what was going on outside with his allies overall. So there we go. There is knowledge of what happened regardless. There are witnesses who have seen that Al was going to use the sealing technique. So it's not just Subaru alone who had done this shit to Al and that's it, right? Or I guess Subaru and Beatrice more so and that's it, right? Garfield and Ezzo had seen. There is still progress with this. We just obviously had to reach this point in order to get there. And then we get a very short chapter that's just kind of a small little interlude, which is weird to say interlude in a sense when we're pretty much right at the finale. But just going over Petra and the whole thing that she had spoken with the imaginary Subaru, more specifically talking about what she had sacrificed, that being the possibility of being his bride. It's a cute moment and it does make you feel bittersweet for her in a sense of like, obviously this was never going to happen, but you can understand that this is this one-sided love she feels for him, and she's cutting off any chance she's ever going to get with that sort of thing. Of course, yeah, by proxy of the previous chapter, all that's reversed, but still, some of those vows could potentially still be in place, and then on top of that, still, it's still quite the heavy moment to have in there. But with that, we get our final chapter to Arc 9, fittingly called Reweave. I'm kind of wondering now if Arc 10 is going to have a final chapter called Recollect, and this is just going to be a common theme we have from now on. I mean, we had Straight Bet before, after, Straight Bet in the actual anime and everything, so wouldn't be shocking. But we have Reweave, our final chapter that doesn't go too much into Subaru and his group. Like, we get some of it, right? We get the whole idea of they're about to head out and they're getting ready for all that and everything, and they're gonna figure out what's going on with Al. Subaru even promising to save Al. But yeah, a majority of this chapter is pretty much everybody else. For example, we start off with Roswell in the burial domain, the burial household, and he's focused on he's gonna win over some favor here, because ideally, if Amelia has a better chance at winning the selection, that's a big win for him. So maybe he can take over the domain, and now he's the big head honcho of the burial household, and that's all it takes to win some favor for Amelia. But then Ye, who had retreated as a result of not getting the signal to move in with Al, came back here and delivered a secret little letter that Priscilla had wrote right to Schult. And Schult receives the letter, reads it out, and it's revealed that after Priscilla passes, or assuming that she does pass, of course, because they haven't fully known, or I guess Priscilla herself more so. If that were to happen, Schult will be named the legitimate son of her, and he will now be called Schult Burial. So now, he's the owner of this whole household. This is his place. This is his camp. It's his own. And I do think that's a really sweet moment. Just having this character who essentially was acting like a son for Priscilla, and fitting to use that word, son, because in a sense we can use both ways you could spell it. But having this character who was acting like that for Priscilla and giving him the burial name as a result, it's like, that's sweet. That's really sweet. Again, this is yet another moment where you do see this much kinder side to Priscilla and understand that, yeah, she's not really evil or anything. Like, she gets amused by, wicked things happening. I guess not really wicked, because that implies, like, witch cult and stuff like that. But family drama and stuff like that amuses her. However, ideally, she does want people to be happy, right? And this is another scenario of that, of like, Schult means a lot to her. So she is willing to go that far and be like, nope, that's my kid. He now owns this place. All you work for him now. That's how it is. He does a good job. Y'all enjoy working with him. That's it. And Ye even brings up secretly to herself, kind of whispering it to the now gone Priscilla, that it's a little strange that Ye managed to sneak up on Priscilla, who was pretty perceptive of her, and see that the letter was being placed somewhere. And very obviously being shown as, yup, I'm putting this letter right in here in this secret storage, and no one better know. As if to say that she might have known that Ye was looking, and just being like, yep, if I ever pass or anything like that happens, I have this letter right here that should be handed to Schult. Okay, I'm gonna walk out of this room now, right? It's an interesting sort of moment to, again, see this broader sort of perspective of Priscilla and how pretty damn smart she is. She's got this shit on lock, and it's, as always, unfortunate with what had happened with RK, but she's a damn good character, and we respect the fuck out of her for that. So, we have a little bit more of this chapter, because we actually get to see the elders for the first time in a while, right? The big head honchos of this whole council, because obviously we don't have a proper king just yet of the kingdom of Lagunica, and someone is there, and they've got blonde long hair and red crimson eyes. I mean, I guess red crimson implies the same sort of thing, but you know what I mean, dazzling sort of crimson eyes. Now, the obvious thing when you hear that you might think is a very specific character that we already know by now, who had their eyes changed to pink in the anime. I'm not saying that as a complaint, I'm just saying that as it does always surprise me that her eyes were changed to pink, like a pinkish red sort of thing. Still works, but it is a little surprising. However, that might be the first thing we think of when we see this character. But as of right now, where I'm currently at, that is not the case. This character is a nun of the Church of the Dragon. First time we are hearing about this But you know what? It works. This seems like such an important sort of facility, you know, sort of group, that it makes sense to keep them hidden until just now. And she believes that her church and, you know, herself as well, with what she's capable of, they might be able to heal certain ailments that people in Lagunica are suffering from. Mainly two things: gluttony and lust. The shit that both had done, whether it be Lai, Roy, and Louis, or Capella herself, all of them can have just the sort of ailment that they have, whether it be their names and everything they've forgotten, or just, you know, in general, the dragon's blood that they've had to suffer and being morphed into different creatures. All of that could be fixed if they're willing to accept the church's help. Now, of course, they're skeptical of this. This is quite a big deal, but this could mean a lot. To entrust someone with that, and especially there could be ulterior motives going on, they're not too sure. But she decides to say, well, okay, how about I have one test. One test to show that this can be done, we can fix these things, and there's no issue. They see to it, and this nun is now brought over to where Fyrus and Wilhelm are. And there's a third person in that room, that being Krush. And she reveals, not Krush, but this nun, reveals that she can help Krush with what's going on. And they're curious to obviously learn her name, because if she can do this, then, you know, who is she? This makes no sense, right? But what throws Fyrus off most is how she looks, right? Blonde hair, red eyes. For Fyrus, that means a lot, right? I mean, obviously you could always point to like Capella, but more specifically, there's a certain close friend to both Fyrus and Krush that she looks related to, and that is pretty significant. So Fyrus asks her name, and she reveals herself to be Filore Lagunica, the kidnapped member of the royal family that we had heard about for so long now, and we thought was Felt. That's her right there. Or at least presumably. We don't know, or at least I don't know, just yet, because this is where the entire arc ends off, and what a fucking cliffhanger to hit us with. Yeah, in its entirety, this arc is fantastic, right? Not just off this alone, but everything that this arc has hit us with in total has amazed me. I love this arc a lot. This is my second favorite arc of the series, and I have willingly, if you've seen my tier list on Twitter, or I mean the link to it in the YouTube posts that I've made, you'll know that I put this right up there on the same tier as Arc 6. That's a pretty big deal. Like, yeah, it's behind Arc 6, but it doesn't change the fact that it is up there. It's a lot. This arc is really damn huge, and even with the whole turning back time in there, again, that works to its advantage. There's still so much good shit in this arc, and I love it a ton. And I've been hearing Arc 10 is super crazy as well, and I can't wait to get to that, right? That's only 2 volumes in, but it's like, oh man, I can't wait. And it's led me to say something, specifically with this, specifically with Arc 9, but hearing about Arc 10 has made me think about it a bit more. And I am ready to say a statement that I never ever thought I would say, because these top 2 do not interact at all. They do not compete. They stay in their 2 spots and never move. But I might just say, by Arc 10, that ReZero could potentially be my favorite series of all time. More than Fist of the North Star. I did not think Fist of the North Star would ever be topped, because it is such a special series to me, and there is so much to it that I love. Like, a ton. And again, right now, it hasn't been, but this is really fucking good, dude. Right? And obviously, you always have to wait for a series to end to have the full understanding of, like, was it really worth it to go through this whole story and experience everything and whatever it may be. But like, I don't know, all of this is really putting my trust into the end of this series. All of this is making me think, yeah, you know what, I think this will be fantastic by the end. I think we will reach the ending of this series, and, you know, I'll be doing the pose. I'll be doing, okay, yeah, alright. ReZero number 1, right? It's like, it's good. It's really fucking good. I love this a lot. I can't wait for Arc 10 and just going through that and everything. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Yeah. Arc 9 was really damn good. Super great growth for Petra. Super good to learn more about Al and just see more with him. Getting characters like Ye and learning more about Roy, or rather seeing this better side to him than the small bits we had seen before that didn't paint him in a very good light. All of this was damn nice. Even characters who, again, have to go back to Arc 7 and Arc 8 sort of scenarios, specifically, obviously, Rem. Even with what she had here, having that fight with Ye was so absurdly good. And the fact that Ye's even still waiting for Al to return shows that that feeling is still there, right? It's like, I love this. I love this a lot. But yeah, with that said, that's the arc. This is the end of the video. We have reached the end. It's weird to do this again because normally I would, you know, normally this would cut to black. If you weren't watching the full version of this video, this is the part where it would cut to black. But because this is also going to be a part of that, it's just this. Everything from here on is going to be on the full video. But yeah, Arc 9. What a damn good arc. I can't wait to start Arc 10. This is going to be very fun, and if you're interested, we have the live reading sessions always. Any of them that are technically, like, you know, archived in a sense, like previous live reading sessions, are all publicly visible on the live area, so you can just watch them all there. We'll obviously have more to come with Arc 10. Yeah, and that's about it for that. For this video, I guess. Whew. Apologies on the wait on this for a bit. I mean, more so with actually getting through the reading of this. Obviously, there was this whole thing with, like, recording it because I was fucking sick for, like, a whole week or two. It was actually, like, 2 weeks. But that was rough. It was also rough because it was, like, transferring around my whole body. It was going from, like, the neck to, like, my nose. And then it went back to my neck in the sense of, like, I was coughing a whole lot. And it was just, like, it was weird. It was just like this train of, like, oh, like, up and then, oh, down. And it was like, I don't know what the fuck happened, like, there. But yeah, I'm alright now. I'm alright. Don't worry. Still, now that I'm feeling nice and better, I'm going to get everything ready here. Obviously, if you're watching the full video of this, you'll see this, you know, already in terms of clicking on the video. But for the people that are watching this from the actual raw review itself, I'll have the full version out probably soon, probably a couple of weeks, right? Either 2 or 3 weeks, simply because I have to get the thumbnail ready. Yes, this time I am going to actually try and draw the thumbnail in there, all that. We will also see if this full version of the video that you're all watching has EX6 on it, because I'll be honest, I have not made great progress at all with that, and it's unfortunate because I have wanted to get caught up with stuff that I've already been reading, right? Like, I've wanted to get back to Berserk. I wanted to get caught up on it. And I'm like, I had that sitting on my desk prior to EX6 sitting here on my desk. And I meant to get back to it at some point, but I'm like, no, you know what? Let me blitz through EX6 and then I'll get back to that. And then I've barely blitzed through that at all, right? So Berserk's kind of just been sitting there, and I'm like, shit, maybe I should go back to that. Whole bunch of other stuff I've been reading as well. I mean, obviously, I could point out, like, Star Blossom, but that I'm pretty much caught up on. I read that as soon as, like, literally within a few hours that new chapters drop, I read that, typically. So that's fine. That's not really taking up my time in terms of reading. But I've been reading some of the other stuff, like Starting Gate and the I think it's Uma Musumeshi, I believe it is. The one all about food, the small skit sort of stuff that focuses mainly on like food and all that. I've been reading that one as well and been enjoying that, but I took a break on that for a while and just, yeah, haven't gone back to it, but I intend to at some point. I was reading Hunter x Hunter to get caught up on that, right? I was like, I was like thinking about it recently, especially because me and my brother had like somewhat started it. We watched the first episode. I told him, oh yeah, I think this series will really be for you. And we have yet to get back on it because we've been watching other stuff in the meantime, and eventually we'll get back to it. But still, I wanted to start reading that again and being like, oh yeah, I should get caught up and find out, what's going on with current arcs and everything. I mean, shit, it's coming back, right? So I might as well. I took a break from that slightly. Like, a lot of this is stuff that happened like quite a few weeks ago in terms of like me reading and then being like, okay, let me put this down for a second, and then I put it down for a while. And I mean, even more recently, I get to show this now. I fucked up even further because I started another thing. I was like, man, you know what I want to read? Bocchi. I kind of want to continue from where the anime left off. Like, I thought about it again, and I think I don't mind how, like, the 4-coma style kind of goes, right? Originally, I was opposed to it a little bit, but I think now I'm cool with it. But I think if I'm going to do it, I'm going to need a physical volume. I have a physical volume now. So, been reading that as well. So, there's a whole lot of stuff that I've been reading in the meantime. And it does take up my time in that sense. I don't know how EX6 is going to go. Maybe it's attached to this video. I might have the opportunity to do so in terms of like a few days of just reading through the whole thing, right? It's happened before. That's what happened with the previous EX volumes, is I read them within either a day or a few days. So maybe I'll have that opportunity to get again. But if I'm already working on the thumbnail and then I'm already like reading all these things, I don't know what's gonna happen. You'll know if you're watching the full video. If not, we'll find out when we get there. We'll find out when we get there, because I don't know. Otherwise though, I will either release it as its own review, I will release it combined with the previous EX2 and EX3 reviews to have, the trilogy in there. Or emergency glass scenario, it's part of Arc 10's full review. I don't think we're going to go that far, but if I really have to, for some reason, go that far, sure, right? Also, obviously, it doesn't help that, Xenoverse has been the big focus lately because we're working on that video still. I've actually been recording the footage for that recently, just getting all the gameplay in there, because I also have to record gameplay of the first game, and if you know how Xenoverse 1 is, oof. But yeah, I have to record footage of all that, so it's like, I'm drawing, recording all that, obviously going through the daily tasks of life, and in my downtime, I'm reading all these series and watching a whole bunch of stuff. That said, I've been having a pretty great time with all this stuff I have been experiencing. Like, in terms of, I'm going to put it like this, in terms of being a nerd, right? In terms of being a big old nerd, I've been having a great time lately. I got to read Arc 9, and soon we're going to read Arc 10, and that was huge, right? That was a really damn good arc to read through. It made me feel great. Shortly after that, I got to play Chapter 5 of Deltarune. That made the game, like, super, super fucking extra super high up in my top games of all time list. Like, I loved Chapter 5 so much. Easily my favorite, right? Fuck, that was good, right? So already 2 things in there, great, right? Been reading all this stuff, like, again, Bocchi, all this, it's like, I've been having a great time with all that, right? Like, Starting Gate was fun to read. Well, I mean, I still have to read more of it. I put it down, like I mentioned, but it's like, that was fun to read. Bocchi feels like it's improving on quality as I get further into it, and it's making me sit there and think, man, I can't wait for season 2. It's gonna look crazy, and it's gonna have all this like crazy good, writing to it. I mean, nothing like insane, I guess, in a sense for writing, but for how characters interact, for how characters develop, it's like it's really damn good. So it's like, oh man, that's gonna be so damn nice when it gets animated. But even just as is, that's great. So I've been having an awesome time with that. And then watching series wise, right, like watching animes or whatever it may be, couple weeks back, this might even be a little bit longer than a couple of weeks back. This might have been around the time that I was, you know, I temporarily put a hold on Hunter x Hunter and then forgot to pick it up again. I had started Gundam, specifically. This might not be shocking as the, you know, specification for what series of Gundam, because both my poll and also recency, but Witch from Mercury I had started, and I am past the first core now. As of currently, I'm only on episode 1, or well, past episode 1 of core 2. I have the rest of it to watch at some point. I've been having a beautiful time with that. That is like, it's so far, especially with how the first core ended. I only knew a few scenes from the series, and I'm not going to go into, you know, too many spoilers about that, but it's like, I knew a few scenes, and one was only the implication of a scene. I know one scene, which I think is how this series is probably going to end, right? So that's cool. I like the idea of it, if that's, you know, what I've essentially heard correctly. But that was mainly because of a whole bunch of drama with this sort of thing that, not really drama, but I guess making the show look better for shareholders and all that, which, yeah, I'll talk about when I get to the talks about video for the year. That's a whole different subject that's going to get me upset and ranting for a while. But then I had seen a scene with a fridge, right, with our main character, who I'm enjoying so much, just having some overnight snacks, you know, by a fridge that's just wide open, I'm pretty sure. At least I think that's what I remember the scene being, and I've yet to see that. I've yet to see it. So that tells me, okay, that's on the way at some point. And then the third being how that first core ends, and it's like, ooh, you know, at first I thought that was a normal thing to the show, and then I got to that scene and I had, like, you know, that reaction you get of a billion thoughts at once, and I had realized the context for all of this and the background surrounding it, and I went, oh, this is going to be way worse than I thought it was. But yeah, that was a great finale to the first core of it, and I've been enjoying that a shit ton. It's probably going to place really high up for me. I think that's going to be a show that places really damn high up. I know I fucking rambled there a lot about Witch from Mercury. I just really wanted to talk about it, because that's what, out of everything so far, okay, with the exception of Deltarune, out of everything else so far, that has been the thing that I've been enjoying the most. And it's like, it's not even to riff on everything else, it's just to say that Witch from Mercury has been fantastic. I've been enjoying the shit out of it. I've been loving this so much. But that's about it, right? It's just, I've been having a lot of fun with all that, and it's made me feel great for just getting to be a nerd that enjoys all this stuff. It's nice. With that said, though, I'm going to try and overall wrap this up fairly quickly. I brought up the poll earlier. We're going to list off the important stuff now just because. But I brought up the poll earlier. That's now up again. So if you are interested in participating in the end of the year tourney / rumble, whatever it may be, right? Whatever we really want to classify this as. If you'd be interested in voting for some of the characters on there, feel free to do so. The poll will be in the description. It also might be up here on the card. All that. You can get to it a whole bunch of ways. But yeah, any means that you would like to go about that, there you go. Ideally, like usual, vote for around 15 to 30 characters, however you please. There'll be more added later, just in case there's any that, like, you think, I don't know. Like, I don't know if, like, I have enough to go that far. You can always edit your answer later. So if you have just 15 as is, like, even at the minimum, right? But you might want to change some of those. There'll be more added later. You can go back in, you can edit it, no problem. And then from there, the top characters will all make it in to the end of the year stuff. So yeah, and I mean, fittingly with this, important to note, we actually have some Arc 9 characters in there. Ye is in there, Petra is in there, Al is in there. Al was actually in there before, but now he's even more relevant. And Heinkel is in there. So if you're interested in voting for any of those characters, there you go. They're all in that poll. Feel free to do so if you feel like it. whoever it may be. Even Suletta from Witch from Mercury is already in there, because I knew I was going to enjoy it off like just a few episodes alone. I was willing to put it in there. Also because it's the culmination of the year. That's the point of the end of the year stuff. So yeah, why not? But yeah, there's that. Obviously, in regards to videos and stuff like that, I mean, I mentioned recording footage for it. I am still working on the Xenoverse video. I've realized by now I can't just say dates. I can't just say, hey, it'll probably be out this month. I need to take the process of, if I know I'm in the final stages of this sort of video, that's when I can say it's probably around here, right? But when I'm still working on it, that is probably not the best point to say, hey, by the way, I think it'll be around here. So that's still being worked on. I'll give you a more final sort of date as we get closer to the actual final product of the whole thing. But yeah, I'm excited to actually properly drop that. In a sense, I'm excited that it took this long, because I actually get to talk about Xenoverse 2 in its entirety now. And I even get to talk about Xenoverse 3 a little bit, because some of the gameplay of that's been revealed. So I get to speak on that. That's going to be a big video, obviously, as per what I've mentioned before. Can't wait to drop that. I think it'll be very enjoyable. So there's that. Obviously, we have ADT, the most recent arc, arc 2 of Act 2. It's funny to say 2 that much. I brought that up even with the actual arc. But Arc 2 of Brave Blood has essentially already finished its uploading, sort of, every couple of days. So if you're interested in reading The Hunted, then yeah, I mean, all that's available right now, and we are going to currently work on The Great Shadow War, which is an arc I've very much been looking forward to writing. I even might have a special little art piece to share with it, but we'll get there. We'll get there. I'll wait on showing that, but maybe soon. Maybe soon. Maybe not that soon, but you know what I mean. Soon in relative terms. But still, that's on the way, and if you're interested in the second arc, feel free to do so. Other than that, it's as simple as mentioning that, hey, more live reading sessions on the way, more reactions on the reaction channel on the way for Arc 6, and I didn't expect to say this. I made this as a joke. I said this as a joke during the final episode of Arc 6, or like the first core, rather. I made the joke that, oh, maybe I'll be back here soon for a specific horror series. And then that specific series decided to announce, hey, our new episode is coming summer 2026. In fact, it's teased that a couple times now, as of recording this. So that's cool. I'm going to be back sooner than I thought, probably. Or later. I don't know. It could be before August 12th. It could be after August 12th. Either I'm back for Arc 6, or we're back for that. But yeah, so if you're interested in the live reading sessions, I suppose I could say just stick around. We'll be back for Arc 10. And then for the reaction channel, yeah, we'll be back with Arc 6 on all that. And again, that fucking episode 5, oh boy. I don't know if I'll keep the lights out for that. We'll figure that out. I'll figure that out in a moment. But as per usual, I think I've said enough here. So, with that said, take care. Have yourselves a great night. Stay safe. And I will see you all with the next video. I suppose we'll be back next time with Arc 10. And other stuff as well, but, specifically in this topic, Arc 10. Farewell, peeps.